Hello there, and welcome back to The Disconnected. I'm here with Joe Lynch, the director of Suitable Flesh that just came out on Blu-ray.
Wait, hold on. No, wait. Hey, look, a physical copy of Suitable Flesh. Look, wait, it'd be great if I could just grab it right now.
I went the wrong way, too.
Oh, that'd be so amazing. Thank you so much for having me on, Ryan.
Genuinely, this is ridiculous because I've appreciated your work for a long time, but something like this, it's monumental, especially for fans that have been, around horror for a lot of their life. This is like a true love letter to Stuart Gordon through and through. I'm grateful that you would do something like this, especially for a lot of people that Stuart Gordon was important to. Suitable Flesh, first off, where'd it come from for you? Like, this is a big deal.
Believe me, as a huge disciple of Stuart Gordon, even as far back as, say, like 1985, when I first saw Reanimator, when I thought, because, like, I remember, I'll never forget it, like, there was a time, I'm going to take you way back, Ryan, way back to the 80s, when they had radio ads for movies. And it would always, it would be this announcer that's like, the most unbelievable spectacle of sci-fi horror ever committed to film. Enemy Mine, rated R, coming to a theater near you. Maybe not Enemy Mine, but it's a different story for a different day. But Reanimator had somewhat similar of a very bombastic narrator talking about the movie, but at the end, it was like, experience the ultimate, in medical terror, H.P. Lovecraft's Reanimator. And I it will scare you to pieces. I was like, and then, this film is not rated. I was like, oh, I'm in. Yeah. Like, I was only like a burgeoning splatter punk, if you will, at the time. But I thought that H.P. Lovecraft directed Reanimator because the only other person I'd ever heard had their name on top of a movie was John Carpenter. Yeah. And I was like, well, who is this H.P. Lovecraft dude? Doing what little non-internet based research that I could at the time, I was like, oh no, he's the writer. But who's the guy who directed it? Because that movie, pardon my French, but fucked me up. Yeah. And I got very much into Lovecraft. But then I became a huge fan of Stuart Gordon, not just because then he did Dolls and he did From Beyond, but he also, I'll never forget being in the theater and watching Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and going, why is Stuart Gordon's name on Honey, I Shrunk the Kids? Yep. This guy can do everything. And seeing how he traversed through genres so deftly, between his horror output, but being able to do, Robot Jocks or Space Truckers or The Man with the Ice Cream Suit or The King of the Ants that no one talks about, who everyone should talk about that movie. Funny enough, have you ever seen King of the Ants?
I have, yeah.
Okay,
I watched
all right.
Just a couple years ago, all of the Stuart Gordon stuff as much as I could.
Do you want me to blow your mind right now?
Let's do it.
This is a bit of a spoiler for anybody who hasn't seen Suitable Flesh, but the main actor in King of the Ants, who plays the lead, Chris McKenna, right? Chris McKenna is the guy that's on the couch with Heather in the hypnotism scene, playing the same character from King of the Ants.
Oh, shit.
He's Crowley from King of the Ants years later, going through his own, more trauma, so to speak. I mean,
nice.
There were all of these little things that, you don't have to be a Stuart Gordon fan or Reanimator fan to hopefully enjoy Suitable Flesh. But those in the inner circle that know Stuart's movies well enough or know those films well enough will hopefully be able to pick up on those little Easter eggs. And, the fact that Graham Skipper, who was Dr. Herbert West in the Reanimator musical. Yeah. And had worked with Stuart before, and Greg McDougall, who did the effects for Evermore and for Reanimator, did the effects on this. The fact that Miskatonic University from Reanimator is in Suitable Flesh. I mean, these are the sort of secret handshake things that, I would want when I was watching Joe Dante movies back in the day and going, I know that robot from something, or I know that line, or that those secret handshakes mean so much to horror, especially horror fans. I don't feel like you can do it as much in other genres, but in horror, you can still get away with having your entire cast of characters being named directors from back in the day, like they did in Sleepwalkers, or multiple movies. But these are sort of things that we, as a culture and as a family, it's the same as being in the line waiting for Robert Englund at a convention, and you're in this 3-hour line, and you see someone who's got a Necromantic shirt, and you're like, hey, I like Necromantic. Hey, I like Necromantic as well. Do you ever see part 2? And then you start going on a conversation with them. Next thing you know, you're best friends, and you're exchanging numbers, even if you're, three towns away. So that's the equivalent of why I wanted to infuse a lot of those little things into Suitable Flesh, because I know if I'm as big a nerd about Stuart Gordon movies, I know other people are going to be as well. And you can still show your mom, or you can show your date who's never seen Reanimator before. And while you're laughing, they'll go like, what are you laughing at? It's like, oh, that's the son of the security guard from Reanimator, and he's in this one now. And you go like, well, wait, Reanimator? Oh, hold on, I'll show you that next. We need those things to kind of create an algorithm for our significant other or our friends to be able to share the wealth of horror. So that's my long-winded answer to whatever question you had. I don't even think you had a question. I'm just excited to be here.
Either way, it was the perfect just lead into what happened, because I swear, I think Miskatonic was on the screen not even 30 seconds into the film, and I bust out laughing. And my wife was like, what's going on? It just started. And it's that connection that goes, it's not even 30 seconds, and this is special already.
I got you. I mean, even when the zipper opens in the first shot, and you see Barbara Crampton and Graham Skipper in the same shot looking into the camera. For some people, there's going to be some audience members who know Stuart's work, who know Barbara's work, and Graham's work, who are going to be like, this is like a super group getting together and starting to play. Because obviously I'm very aware of both of their bodies of work in a Stuart Gordon, and Dennis Paoli scripted film. I'm not, this is not for nothing. I'm very aware of that. But, you want to make sure that you feel like you're in good hands, especially when it comes to horror, and especially when it comes to, and I hate using this word, but when it comes to intellectual property or IP,
right?
Like Lovecraft, and even the Miskatonic movies that Stuart and Brian and Dennis worked on, like From Beyond and Reanimator. When you're working in that world, when you set yourself up to be in that world, you kind of have to deliver something. I know some critics were like, oh, it wasn't Stuart Gordon-y enough, or wasn't crazy enough. Well, to each their own. But I know in my heart that I've paid respect enough to Stuart beyond, I don't know if you got all the way to the end of the movie, but we have that big dedicated to Stuart Gordon moment, and they shot in Cthulhu scope, These are things that, as a fan myself, I would appreciate. And I know other people would too.
Well, we did. This was such just a fun experience to watch something like this. And really, there's a couple things I kind of want to just see what you're feeling, because this is so different than a lot of what we're getting nowadays. I mean, we're not getting a lot of something that feels like the early 90s like this.
Yeah.
We're not getting the risky type films. Unfortunately, a lot of the films that we get, especially in the horror genre, are neutered, or lately it's from international scenes. And those are killing it. But this feels like a fresh new step, and it's funny because it feels like such a nostalgic new step in a way.
I think when it comes to movies like this, what's interesting about some of the influences of Suitable Flesh, everything from, if you look at the 90s, things like The Last Seduction or Lost Highway, and if you go back into the 80s, or Basic Instinct, then you go back into the 80s with Body Double and Dress to Kill and Body Heat. These are all films that were also throwbacks to film noir from the 40s, where you would have your hapless protagonist that gets thrown into a situation beyond their control, and then you have the femme fatale, and in this case we had the home fatale, the doting wife at home that ends up becoming part of the story. All of these tropes were things that were being cultivated way back with Joseph Lewis and and even oh God, now it's going to kill me, the director, Sam Fuller. When they were making films and 40s films, and they were making it in this film noir world that was derived from Dr. Caligari and German Expressionism.
Right.
It all feeds into each other. And, all the movies that like I was looking at, I'm going, God, why don't they make these movies anymore? Why don't they make erotic thrillers? Why don't they make, body horror the way like this that we haven't seen in a while? And, and honestly, a lot of this is purely coming from a movie goer standpoint going, this is what I want to see. I haven't seen a good sex scene, or I haven't seen good eroticism or just horny cinema in modern movies in a while. Now that said,
Right.
then Suitable Flesh comes out, and then Poor Things and Saltburn, and it's like I feel like there is the pendulum has now been swinging the other way when we've been very conservative, whether it was through our culture in general, politics. Obviously the Me Too movement, changed the game up for many, many good reasons. But I think it also, and I'm only speaking for myself, but when the Me Too movement happened, which needed to happen, and I'm so glad it did for so many reasons, it did make filmmakers, both male and female, a little skittish to present sexuality in films, because it meant that they had to shoot that stuff and they had to present that to the actors. And there's a very defined atmosphere on a set when you're shooting a sex scene. It's a little uncomfortable. Like it's, look, you're trying to capture passion and spontaneity in the most unsexual and most like almost voyeuristic way possible. You have all these people standing. It's almost like that scene in Boogie Nights when Nina Hartley is having sex in the parking lot. That's what it's like making a sex scene. That's exactly what it's like making a sex scene. And I have been both on the directing side of that and the crew side of that. I've also been in sex scenes before, and it is incredibly uncomfortable. But if you can create an environment that allows everyone to feel like they are being respected and there's total consent and everyone is on the same page, then you can hopefully create that chemistry. And for the last couple of years, until maybe very recently, I think filmmakers have just been a little scared of it. Also, and this is really insider baseball, but when you get an intimacy coordinator involved, which is kind of a new job that has come up through the annals of the last couple of years, and making sure that people are being treated fairly and properly and consensually. I've been on sets where, it's kind of taken the air out of the room a little bit, because someone is there like looking at every single movement and going like, could that, should that be like that? Or is that person cool with that? And, it kind of takes the sexiness out of the room. And again, like it needs to be there. Let me just posit that as well, so I don't get in trouble, but it's true. But that's where, that's a cost thing. That's having another crew member on set. And when you're doing something that's a little on the lower budget side, can you afford to have that person on set every day when you have a situation like this? So there's so many insider baseball reasons why eroticism and sexuality has not been, I guess, better displayed in film lately. And that was something that, I feel like Suitable Flesh at least reminded people that you can be horny in genre films, and without complete consequence, without it just being like, okay, here's the slasher coming in and stabbing him with a machete or something like that, that there's much more subtle consequences involved. But I'm glad we were part of that.
And having a newly minted 21-year-old, making his way to the world with Heather Graham in the same bed, that's got to be an interesting, uncomfortable scene already.
That was very, very interesting. Our first day of shooting was the, as I like to call it, the Texas switch sex scene between Heather, Jonathan, and Judah. Originally, our very first scene was the dinner scene when he brings out the Bronzino and everything. That was our very first scene. And, I can be the first person to tell you that, like, everybody was, it was first day jitters and everybody was a little bit nervous, and I was trying to make it as, easy as possible so that we can get upstairs and, get into the meat and potatoes, so to speak. So, we shot that first scene, and people were kind of feeling each other out. Heather and Jonathan knew each other for years, but they had never worked together before. We had done rehearsals and we had done, kind of chemistry reads and all that crap, so they were into it, but this is, again, day one. Judah had never been in a sex scene before ever. And here it is. I had to be the douchebag auteur that's like, and there's going to be this shot where Jonathan goes down on, on Heather, and then in the same shot, Judah comes up. And not only are we representing oral sex in a positive way by having a man go down on a woman, which we haven't seen a lot, we're also getting two characters in one shot. How clever of me. Well, then you get to shooting it, and you're like, now I have these three absolutely gorgeous people in various stages of undress, all on this bed. And it's just me and the camera person. The sound person is off to the corner. They've already mic'd everybody up so that there's minimal people in the room so that there's as much comfortability on set as possible. But like poor Judah, and this is a testament to how amazing and mature that kid is. He had not turned 20 yet. He turned 24 days later. I think personally he turned 21 that night. But he was as nervous as anybody else. I mean, Jonathan and Heather had been in a few sex scenes before. Judah hadn't, and they were so supportive of him. They were so nice, and everybody felt like, well, we're diving into this feet first, or no, head first, or genitals first, if you will. But everybody did it where it was completely respectful, and everybody was having as good a time as you possibly could in that situation. And it's one of my favorite scenes in the movie because it really does set where Elizabeth Derby as a character is in her life, what she desires, and it's done in a way that's a little bit more stylistic, that feels a little more like like an erotic thriller from like the 80s or whatever. And that was the whole point. Plus, I got a positive representation of ASMR in the scene because everybody's using that now. It's like, oh, I got to turn the rain machine on, or I got to put I got to put something sexy on in the background. Yeah. It's a YouTube video of waves crashing. Like that to me is like, that's indicative of the modern sex scene in cinema.
Yikes. I mean, that's a really good tradition or transition into something that I've just always noticed through what you've worked on is a lot of the people that you've been fortunate enough to have in your films. Like, obviously, you've got these massive people like Heather Graham and Salma Hayek, obviously, that are already stars. But then you're getting people that are early, like to have Judah or to have Stephen Yeun, and then Stephen just won multiple awards in the last month for an incredible piece of work that he did. And
I don't want to sound like an asshole, but I look like a fucking genius. I swear to God.
That's what I'm getting at. Like how I don't know if it's just luck, but like there are certain people that when others work with them, they seem to just have this footpath in front of them that they're just like yearning for greatness, and you've already guided them towards that. And it's not just you. There's probably 5 or 8 people that it seems like it's magnetic for that sort of thing. Like, how does that work out?
Honestly, believe me, a lot of it is fucking luck, to be honest with you. Like, but I think a lot of it too is, I came from, I don't want to say an acting background, but like my first love before I knew I wanted to be a director was an actor. I either wanted to be an actor or I wanted to be a makeup effects artist. So I wanted to be Tom Savini, essentially. It wasn't until later on that I went like, oh, a director gets to do all of this stuff. But I still studied acting and drama, in school, and I've acted a bunch, in other people's stuff. And I think that there is a communication level, and there's a certain vernacular, even just like an energy that you convey that I think directors like Rob Reiner or Sidney Pollack, I think they make other actors feel comfortable that they are looking out for their best interest. They're not just worried about the shot or the gag. And, anytime that I've ever approached any actor in anything that I've done, I always try to, and I think this is just inherent because like I've been on the other side of the camera, is, like I'm very, very much concerned and aware of character, drama through character. And there are certain words you can say, there are certain skill sets that you have, there's certain ways that you can present notes or direction to actors so that they don't feel it. If you just say, do that but better, or that but faster or slower,
right?
I've been on that side where I'm like, that doesn't help me, dude. But if the actors feel like they're being approached not because of their Q score or their star meter or their face and the amount of followers they have, but that you're truly approaching them from a skill and a craft and a talent sensibility. Anytime that I've ever had an audition with an actor, from Henry Rollins in Wrong Turn 2 to Peter Dinklage in Knights of Badassdom, Salma Hayek in Everly, Anthony Mackie in Point Blank, especially Stephen and Samara in Mayhem, and then with like Heather and Judah, and even Barbara and Jonathan and Bruce in this movie. Anytime that we were I was there to approach them to talk about the movie, it always came from a character standpoint. And anytime that I'm on set, that's my family, and I'm very protective of that family. And I want to make sure that obviously that we are being responsible to the budget and the time and making sure that we make our day and what have you. But I'm not moving on until both myself and my scene partner, because I never call them my actors, I call them my scene partner, because I'm in it with them as well. Right. We are doing this dance together. Just because I'm behind the camera doesn't mean I'm not in the scene in one form or another. I am as representative of this as they are. And if they're going to go off the deep end, if they're going to be on the hot seat, I want them to feel like I'm there too. And that's something that I feel like, at least when they're considering the movie or doing the movie, they at least know that I got their back. That I'm not just going you're going to be great, you're going to look good, we're going to make sure that you look great. Right. It's yeah, that's fine. But I think one of the things I'm most proud of with Suitable Flesh is the fact that Heather's been getting all these great reviews. But because I know she was nervous about this movie, because she's very, very much, not maybe literally naked at points, but she's giving it her all. And there is a version of this film that could have been edited, that could have used all her bad takes. But being a director is not just being a good person on set. It's also being a good what's the right word? A good, I guess, magnifier of the best take and the best choices that the actor makes, that you can go, that's the best take. Take 3, she is definitely where she needs to be, as opposed to take 2, which might have been bigger. Right. It might have been a little more, showy. But that take 3 is an amalgam of take 1 and take 2. I know what a good performance is, being an actor myself, when I'm in the edit room, to pinpoint that's what we're using, that take right there. Yeah, but you know what? And then this is where the editor goes yeah, but her hand is up here when it should be down here, and the continuity is not right. I'm you know what? No one's going to give a shit. If the acting is bad, they're going to notice all that stuff. If the acting is great, they're not going to notice continuity at all. Look at Thelma Shoemaker. She's been lucky enough to have Martin Scorsese directing these fantastic performances that don't give any shit about fucking continuity. Schmontinuity. She can then cultivate and pick the best takes, and then somehow make it into this collage of performance and style that actually works so well that you never notice continuity errors. If anything, she leans into it so much that it makes it part of the style. So that's really where I want the actors to know, before we step foot on a set, before we, they say, okay, let's do this, that, I'm there with you. I've been there with you, and I want to make you, I want to help you bring the best performance out possible at any cost. And, whether that means we have to go over, or whether or not we need another take, or whatever it is, I am there for them. And they, they show up, and we become scene partners together, and it all usually works out really great.
A lot of those choices that you're making are serving more than just the actors. One of the things I really wanted to bring up about this, not seen it talked about regarding Suitable Flesh anywhere, and that's this I don't know, tightrope that seems to be walked in horror lately, that you're discussing mental health in a lot of this movie, but it's not like a lot of modern horror films, which are mental health and trauma shoving down your throat. It's just, this is a fact of life, and these are people that are going through something. It's not a message that is trying to get through necessarily. It's telling a story, and this is just an aspect of that. Was that something that was conscious, or was that something that
I just felt so glad I'm so glad you brought that up, because you're right. It's something that I'm glad. I got to admit, I am blessed that a lot of the stuff that I didn't think was going to be brought up whether the movie came out in Tribeca or the theatrical release and all the festivals and, then all the release things after. I've done a lot of press. And, I'm so grateful that like things like the queer aspect of the film and the sexual fluidity and the gender aspect of the film has come out, no pun, but done in a way where it felt like we weren't shoving it down people's throats. There still is a base. There's a broth, if you will, of the movie that I want to present to the audience. And if they get the other stuff, the more subtextual stuff, the more subversive stuff, great. Again, just like those handshakes, if you don't get it, it's no harm, no foul. But of course we're thinking about it. Of course, the mental health side of it was so important, especially with dealing with, Heather's characteristics, the fact that she is a health professional that is trying to help other people and not indemnify or damn them for having, these. I only want to use the word issue, like, because look, I've never talked about this, but like I've been suffering from depression since I can remember. There was a time where I took, antidepressants and, just to stop the screaming, just to have the other voices in my head just subside a little bit. And, to be honest, like I hated it because, I am the type of person that, can be at, an 8 or a 9 at times, and then a 2 or a 1 at other times. Not to say that I'm bipolar. I've never been diagnosed as being bipolar, but I have some extreme highs and lows. And you know what? I think that's part of the wonderment of being an artist is that you can acknowledge your highs and your lows. And the meds brought me to like about a 5 and a 6 at times, or maybe sometimes a 4, but it kept me at that level. I couldn't have been more fucking boring. And like, even to myself, I just felt like I was just coasting along. Right. And I had to embrace those highs and lows. I had to embrace the screaming. I had to embrace those other voices. And I haven't been on a medication like that ever since, since like 2002 or 2003. And, I've really kind of embraced that. And one of the things that we, especially Heather and Judah and I talked about in those early scenes was the desperation that one has to get to the point of therapy. It takes a lot for someone to admit that they need help. And, supernatural histrionics aside in this movie, there's a way that you can watch this film. You take out the Necronomicon, you take out the Cthulhian stuff, you take out the dead body roaming around in certain points. And you could see this as, a cry for help for people with, multiple personality disorder. I know that there's another phrase for it, but, that's the one that always comes to mind for me. Right. And that's something that, like, I've actually had some people come up to me, like, after screenings and say, like, was that stuff really there? And I'm like, oh, what do you mean? And they'd be like, well, because it feels more like this could be a psychological thriller and this was all just in people's heads the whole time, and they are manifesting the supernatural element as a way of, as almost a defense mechanism for their own, their own, kind of chemical imbalance and how they are dealing with it. We do live, you're right. We do live in a time where trauma horror is like all the rage. I didn't want to go down that path. There was actually a version of this script that could have delved more into the trauma side of it. And I was like, I would rather get to the stuff that creates the trauma and at least know how to understand it. Because, at the end of the day, the characters where they end up in this film are in very, very different places than where they started out, which was obviously intentional. But I wanted to create a sense of madness that, I think we all know very well in our own selves. I think that's something that Lovecraft was very slick, even back in the teens and 20s, almost a century ago. He was dealing with that, whether it was himself, but he was dealing with that from a more scientific approach and almost psychological approach. So that's really, no, believe me, we talked a lot about that, and you are the first person to actually bring that up. So I applaud you, sir. Thank you for getting us.
it was it I don't know, I'm a psych major, so I guess that's gonna come to me, but genuinely, the whole thing, and I don't know if you heard me the first time, it just felt so respectful. It felt so
Oh
real,
yeah.
and so just acknowledging that there are people facing this. And like you, I've, very very similar thing. I've been fighting depression for years, took meds for a little while, but I think just embracing the creativity side of a lot of this and going, no, just fucking deal with it and work around it, and your life can be so much better than being,
Or just
placed in
find
that.
other ways. Exactly. Just find other outlets and avenues to be able to confront. Because,
Yep.
the one thing that I had to learn, I started doing therapy again last year. Just so much was going on in my life, and I needed someone to unload besides my wife. I needed to unload my psyche on other people, and my
Yeah.
other states of affairs to someone on the outside front and a little more objective. And it's always been scary for me to do that, because anytime that I used to do it in the past, I'm like, oh God, I got to do the whole fucking story all over again, and then
Yep.
then I got to do 2 or 3 sessions, and then I find out that person's not right for me, and what have you. So I went back to therapy, and I'm so glad I did, because it was able to therapeutically be able to talk about these sort of things and get it off my chest without having to resort to chemicals that are stifling it down and compartmentalizing it in a way. And I'm not poo-pooing the medical route or the
For sure.
pharmaceutical route at all. To each their own. Everyone's got a different path to their own happiness. I found that I am happiest when I am dealing with it in a creative kind of realm, whether
Same.
it's making a movie or, creating anything, visual or anything from an artistic standpoint, or even just falling into a great movie or falling into a great, story, whether it's on TV, film, whatever. Like, I find myself pulling myself out of those situations through art. And in other cases, it's through my own art, and I think that that's been like the thing that's kind of saved me, for so many years. And that was something that I wanted to make sure was in the movie as well.
It works very well. Speaking of your art, you clearly are an advocate for physical media. Like, there's a lot of stuff that you've been a part of that exists and is tangible.
That was so awesome, by the way. That was so cool. A fan of Lynch. Oh, that was so cool. Oh, look at that. That's so neat.
I had Nights of Badassdom. I wasn't going to pull it out to bring up bad memories.
Oh,
but,
it's no. But you know what? That's another element of trauma, dude. I went through the worst, like one of the worst mental phases of my life through that movie, and now I can happily say that I've gotten through it, and I've embraced the trauma that was Nights of Badassdom, to the point where I used to take someone aside for 45 minutes, and when they agree, dude, I love that Nights of Badassdom, we're like, whoa, hold on, do you have about 45 minutes to an hour, because I want to explain to you the fucking nightmare that movie was. Now,
yeah.
I'm just like, I'm so glad you liked it, and I'm not even being snide about it too. It's like, I have learned throughout the years. I mean, Nights of Badassdom was my second film,
Right.
and I had a good track record up to that point. Wrong Turn 2 was, a kind of a sleeper hit, and everyone really liked it, and it was very well respected. So I thought, like, oh, I'm the new hot thing. And then I make Nights of Badassdom, and then reality set in. I got smacked across the face, like, and I thought, like, okay, I've tarnished my filmography. I've screwed everything up. Now I have a pockmark on my career. But
Right.
so many of our favorite filmmakers have movies like that to them
Yep.
are total dogs, that are completely destroyed, that have been, maybe misunderstood when they first came out, and are now considered masterpieces just because the right people saw them, or the right audience found those movies.
Yep.
And that's a movie that a lot of people really enjoy. And who am I to say they're wrong? I used to say they were wrong, but that was because of my own baggage. Now I go, I'm so glad you like that movie, because, like, I'll sit there and go, but have you seen Everly? Oh, that movie sucks. I'm like, wait a second, I love that movie. You never know. You can never truly predict the subjective eyeballs that are going to be presented onto your art and onto your story. There could be people that are going to watch Suitable Flesh who have a complete aversion to Heather Graham or sex in movies or backup cameras. Who knows what's going to possibly trigger them into what they're going to like or not like. I can't control that. all I can do is put the best version of that and of myself and my version of that out there possible, and then, kind of see where the chips fall from there.
And then by then, it's not even your movie; it's everybody else's. They get to
everybody
ingest
else's.
it, and make it what they
Yep.
want.
Exactly.
But with physical media, I mean, you're talking about people discovering it. You've left this little trail of breadcrumbs for everybody that a lot of artists don't get to do nowadays. A lot of stuff is, languishing after festivals or stuck on streaming, and rights like that is, fucking stuff over. But you're even going back and, giving us a commentary for Beastmaster that you're moderating for Vinegar Syndrome and doing stuff like that. And that's such a cool thing for a filmmaker that is not even invested in that film in the outside world. Like, why do that? Why is that important to you?
Because when I was growing up, when I was a little kid, I had Fangoria and Cinefantastique. I had these magazines, and there was certain shows like Lights, Camera, Action that Leonard Nimoy hosted for Nickelodeon. There were these little like peeks behind the curtain as to the process of making movies. Then in the 90s, when you had Laserdiscs and DVDs, and there was and the internet, obviously, but there was a much wider gap of opportunity to be able to allow people to see how a movie's made. It used to be, I just thought every director had a big bullhorn and they were always on a crane at all times and they're floating around and everything, screaming and yelling at people. And then you start listening to commentary tracks and you start seeing behind the scenes stuff that you don't normally see, if you're not media, because normally they would have like EPKs that would go out to the media and maybe you'd see them on the nightly news, but not in this form. And that kind of behind the scenes processy fodder was my gold. I cherished, I still have all my laser discs. I started collecting them primarily because I got more out of laser discs and the commentaries and the behind the scenes and the deleted scenes and all that stuff. I got more out of the filmmaking process than I did in film school. The only thing I got out of film school was free use of the equipment, to be honest. And I liked my school, but anything that I learned about truly making movies and the craft behind it, the artistry behind it, all came out of those special features. And I thought, well, like these are going to be around forever, but obviously the market has changed. Back in the 90s when DVDs were out, the reason why we had so much stuff, we had a plethora of special features, was because they had the space for it on the disc. So they had to put stuff on there. So they almost like forced film school onto unsuspecting cineasts and burgeoning filmmakers for years. And then the marketplace changed and DVDs weren't as profitable. And, Blu-rays obviously were an extension of that. But now we were getting into streaming, and the thought process that studios were coming from was, well, people don't want that shit anymore. And I was like, there's going to be multiple generations of people that are going to have just as much passion about the craft of filmmaking and just the art of filmmaking. But now they're not going to have the resources of films that have all of those peeks behind the scenes and to show how the sausage is made, so to speak. And I feel like it's my contribution to pass the baton on to future generations, whether they like my movies or not. They can still be able to go back, at least in most of them, and to see like how was Mayhem made and how was Everly made and how was Suitable Flesh made. I mean, I'm not trying to poo-poo the studio, but like when they were talking, I knew that through RLJ we were definitely going to have a physical media release. And, in the past, I've worked with them for years, and we always had a bunch of special features, including a commentary. I am the type of idiot that would literally rip commentaries off of the DVD, make them into MP3 so I can listen to them in traffic. Yep. That's how much I love commentaries. So, and as you know, I can talk a little bit, but I love talking about movies and going on diatribes or talking about that particular shot. Like, I'm proud of the movie, and I want to fucking talk about it. And if it means that someone else is going to want to listen to it, awesome. But the studio was like, oh, we didn't really have any plans for any special features that we're producing. But if you have anything, you can send it our way. I'm like, oh, okay. Now, back in the day, like with Wrong Turn 2 and with Knights of Badass, and I think even with Everly, it was built into the budget that there would be an EPK crew. We didn't have that on Suitable Flesh. I didn't have that on Mayhem. We would have anybody that was shooting something, you just shot it. So it ended up being me a lot of times, or some of my crew members. And then we would put something together from there. I knew that we had a wealth of footage from the making of Suitable Flesh. And there were all these ideas that I had, everything from, the storyboards, because I had never really done copious storyboards the way I did in Suitable Flesh. And I used to love those segments when they would do storyboard to film comparisons. I love that shit. So I'm like, well, I can do that. And I know, I edit most of my own work anyway, so I can just put that together. Or, a conversation with Steve Moore, my composer. The composer never gets the amount of respect that they deserve for technically gluing the whole movie together. And Steve and I have worked together before, and I was like, well, we can do a conversation with Steve, because I'm a big fan of his from Zombie, and he's done multiple things that I've done, and I like talking to the guy. Why not? And then with a commentary, same thing. It's like to be able to sit down with Barbara and one of the producers, Bob Portal, and be able to just kind of talk about the nitty gritty of the movie. I know at the very least, anybody who is even like somewhat temporarily or possibly a fan of this movie, if they dive into the special features, they're going to find something in there that's going to make them either rethink the movie or enhance their thinking of the movie, or who knows, maybe pick up a camera themselves and go, I can do better than that. Good, go for it, because you know what, I did the same thing. So that's why my love for physical media, but also being a vessel for these special features, I think is so important now that filmmakers embrace that, because that should, if we stop demanding it go on these physical media releases, or even like on streaming services. I did a commentary for Mayhem with Steven for Shudder, and it was great. This time they were just like, no, we're good. I'm like, all right, fine, but I could have gotten Heather and Barbara and Judah, but whatever. But at least I know that there's something of an archive of all the hard work that the cast and the crew put together to make this movie. There's a physical record of that, and shows as like a testament to all the hard work that people put into this movie.
Not that the movie's not enough, obviously, but it is always just an easy way to champion all the hard work that goes into it. So thank you for always standing up for stuff like that. As a last question, what were some that were inspirational for you when you were younger? Do you remember specific titles that you would recommend to people to check out that you loved back in the day for commentaries and stuff like that?
For commentaries? Oh yeah. I mean, so the John Milius and Arnold Schwarzenegger commentary for Conan the Barbarian, that one is just rife with un-PC conversation that would not sway now, but it truly feels like it's a fly on the wall situation, which I love. I love that one. Any Scorsese commentary is just gold. The Raging Bull commentary that is actually on the Criterion channel now, that one is highly recommended. One of my favorite fun commentaries is the Kevin Smith commentary that he did for Mallrats, which he got the whole crew and cast together. He actually shot it on video. That was one of the first video commentaries that I had ever seen. But you can just kind of tell that they had a blast making it, as hard as it was. At least the cast was having an absolute blast, and that definitely shows. Let me think. I think those are the ones that kind of spring to mind immediately. I think if anything, to pick your favorite movie, and if it has a commentary, trust me, there will be something on there that you will go the best commentaries to me are not the ones that they recorded, because there was a time where they knew DVDs were profitable and making profit, and they built it into the budget. And they also built it into the marketing schedule that the cast and crew would do the commentary before the movie came out. So everybody on the commentary, for fucking Blade or Ghost Ship or what have you, were all recording those commentaries before the movie either bombed or did successfully and was critically lauded. So everyone's patting themselves on the back, oh man, you guys are great, giving noogies. It's the commentaries that, when you can be more reflective on the resonance of the movie, whether it's a couple years later, 20 years later. My hands down, my two favorite are, it's a twofer. It's anytime you get John Carpenter and Kurt Russell in the same room, and you can listen to them on The Thing and Big Trouble in Little China. like you truly feel like you're at a bar and these two schmoes walked in and you just have the best fucking conversation with them. Like, they pull no punches, especially Carpenter. He gives zero fucks. But that's what I want to hear. I don't want to hear people blowing smoke up each other's ass. I want to hear them go, I really fucked up there. Nah, I'm not the biggest fan of that moment there, but that moment's great. Also, another commentary that was recorded for the Laserdisc of Texas Chainsaw Massacre was one of the first ones that Toby did, I believe, with Dan Pearl and Gunnar Hansen. I think they were in the same room. Sometimes it's hard when you can hear, like, they did separate interviews and they spliced them all together. I like the ones where they're like all in the room together, probably have a couple beers, they're watching the movie, and they're just regaling old stories. The one that they did for Elite's original version of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is one of the best, because Toby is the first person to say, oh man, I really fucked up there. You know, like, that's what I want to hear. I want to hear that, like, whether it was a choice or not, or whether it was, you know, like a happy accident or something that they spent fucking weeks on that corpse that's sitting on top of that memorial, that they really put the time into it. You know, like, I want to hear all that stuff. So, you know, if it's just for recreational fun, or if you really want to take notes, find your favorite movie and try to find a movie that that has a commentary that was like retroactive. You know, so a lot of the movies that came out with, like, Shout Factory and Arrow and Vinegar Syndrome, Severin, all those companies, if they have a commentary that's come out like within the last couple of years and the movie's maybe 10 or 15 years old, that's the one to go for. Less so maybe the ones where it's like, all right, it's been recorded, like they're saying like, yeah, we're recording this 2 days before the premiere, and oh my God, Detroit Rock City is going to be the #1 hit of the summer. And you're like, no, it's not. Nope, that did not happen. Sorry, you know. But if you find at least one of those movies, I guarantee you're going to have a wildly new experience with that movie, and one you'll never forget.
Well said. Thank you for your time, Joe. I know you got other places to be. I appreciate this. This was incredible.
Ryan, honestly, amazing questions. It was such an honor to talk to you. Like, you gave good question, and you were great. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Wow. Thanks so much, Joe. Hopefully we can talk again someday.
Oh, tell Jeremy he really missed out. So screw him.
Oh, I will. Have a good one, sir.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for watching The Disconnected. On the way out, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel, that you've liked the video, and that you've copied the link to be able to share with someone else that may appreciate this.